decisions. It's a surgery that we had to go through it. We also work with the help of our partners on addressing the debt cancellation issues within the HIPC initiative, Paris Club and all that, and thanks to the partners that made this possible. We are working on reforming our tax system, fiscal transparency, including budget transparency, and many others, including banking sector reform, recovery of stolen assets domestically and abroad. But having said this, we know so well these reforms have very serious impact on our people, particularly our weaker segments of our society. And to mitigate the effect of these reforms, we have started a very serious family support program, which will help probably close to 80% of our population when it is completed. We also established a new salary scale, among others. The good news is we started to see some benefits of these reforms. There is for sure the stabilization of the currency. Inflation is coming down, disappearance of fuel and bread queues, but also there is the trade deficit is narrowing and the remittances are increasing. Probably when you compare the first half of last year to this year, it increased by almost fivefold. On the investment climate, we have established a new ministry, enacted a new investment law. We approved a public-private partnership law. Taken together, we're meant to create an environment of conducive investment and all that. We worked also on human capital. We put in place an anti-corruption commission. And I think with the support of our international partners and working together, we established a number of global mechanisms to support this transition. Let me just flag some of them. One is the Friends of Sudan mechanism, which helped us a great deal in putting our issues firm on the agenda of the international community. And we have together organized a Berlin conference, was co-hosted by Germany, the UN and EU, Paris conference on Sudan, and the Paris Club, thanks to the French government and many other partners in helping in that. Then also the HIPC and Paris Club work, World Bank, IMF, many bilateral and multilaterals in this respect. And then finally, in this one, I would like to flag the establishment of UNITAMS, which is a UN body that is going a long way in helping us addressing major challenges of the institution of the transition within the mandate of the mission, which is working hand in hand with us and helping us on all these issues. To conclude, co-chairs, we have indeed inherited an extremely challenging situation of a country that has struggled with conflict for most of its 65 years of independence, or post-independence. The last 30 years was exceptionally challenging. We know so well our journey has so many challenges and risks, but we are determined and committed to make a break with our past and work towards achieving lasting peace, sustainable development and democracy that meet the hopes and aspirations of our people. I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much for your remarks and for sharing with us both the achievements and the challenges of Sudan's transition. I'd now like to open the floor to our distinguished participants. May I remind participants to limit their remarks to 3 minutes so that we can accommodate all who wish to speak. The first speaker on my list is His Excellency, Mr. Sameh Shoukry, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Egypt. Minister Shoukry, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to thank His Excellency Dr. Abdullah Hamdouk, Prime Minister of Sudan, His Excellency Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, and Her Excellency and dear friend Anna Eriksson Søreide, Foreign Minister of Norway, for co-hosting this important meeting at this critical moment for Sudan, providing an opportunity for all international partners to voice their support to Sudan in its efforts to address the outstanding challenges of the ongoing transition. Egypt reaffirms its resolve to continue supporting Sudan while emphasizing the national ownership by the Sudanese of all efforts pertaining to the success of the transitional period. We welcome the steps taken to date to implement the provisions of the constitutional document, and we are confident that all Sudanese stakeholders will remain committed to the constitutional document and the Juba peace agreement, being the main pillars of the peaceful transition. Despite the various challenges since the beginning of the transition, the Sudanese stakeholders have proven their ability to overcome political obstacles through peaceful and responsible political dialogue. Egypt is confident that this responsible approach will continue to prevail. In the same vein, Egypt commends the steps taken by the government of Sudan to enact various macroeconomic reforms and calls upon all international partners to foster Sudan economic development with a view to realize the aspirations of the Sudanese people and to conclude the implementation of the Juba peace agreement. Ladies and gentlemen, the challenges faced by many countries in our region, including Sudan, prove that building the foundations of the state and its various national institutions is the cornerstone to ensure peace, stability, the rule of law, and preserve national sovereignty. Egypt is ready to support all efforts to enhance the Sudanese national institutions in accordance with Sudanese national plans and priorities. We believe that the stability and security of Sudan is an integral part of the stability and security of the whole of East Africa. Also, ensuring peace and stability in Sudan necessitates the creation of a favorable regional environment, enabling Sudan to maintain its security and stability based on the rules of international law and the relevant international agreements. In this regard, we stress the importance of supporting Sudan's right to maintain its sovereignty over its entire territory. Once again, I reiterate Egypt's unwavering support to Sudan, and I thank the United Nations Secretary General and Norway for convening this meeting. Thank you very much.
Minister Shukri. I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Heiko Maas, Federal Minister for Foreign Affairs of Germany.
Mr. Hendok, dear Ina, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. 2 years ago, I visited the Sudan in the aftermath of the revolution. I remember the determination of the people who stood up for democracy. Their courage brought down one of the most oppressive dictatorships in the world. And since then, we have seen a new Sudan emerge. The transition agreement and the Juba peace agreement created a pathway towards lasting peace, stability, and democracy. By rebuilding regional and international ties, the Sudan has returned to the international stage. And the civilian-led government has launched economic reforms supported by the international community and also via the heavily indebted Poor Country initiatives. At the same time, many challenges remain. Last week's events have shown that we must stay vigilant and redouble our efforts to keep the transition on track. Establishing the Transitional Legislative Council, preparing elections, and ensuring women's political participation are key to the Sudan's democratic future. The implementation of the peace agreement and dialogue with those who are not part of the agreement must proceed. And economic reforms and recovery have to remain a priority to improve the lives of the population. In all these steps, the international community stands with Sudan and its people. And we mobilized strong financial and political backing at the international conferences in Berlin and Paris. Germany resumed its bilateral development cooperation, which we are increasing to 435 million euro this year. And we are providing humanitarian assistance, and we continue to be engaged in the debt relief process. And we are supporting the impact work by UNITAM's mission led by Volker Perthes. Prime Minister Hamdok, during the last 2 years, your country has come a long way. Advancing the transition will need further determination. Please count on our support in that effort for a Sudan of peace, prosperity, and democracy. I thank you.
Thank you, Minister Moss. The next speaker on my list is Her Excellency Ms. Rachel Amamo, Cabinet Secretary for Foreign Affairs of Kenya.
Thank you for giving our delegation the floor. Your Excellency Abdallah Hamdok, Prime Minister of the Republic of Sudan, Your Excellency Antonio Guterres, the Secretary General of the United Nations, Your Excellencies, colleague ministers and distinguished delegates, may I begin by thanking the Secretary General and Norway for convening this important meeting on Sudan. I thank Prime Minister Hamdok and the Secretary General for their briefings. Kenya stands in solidarity with our brothers and sisters of Sudan during this time in their history. We commend the people of Sudan for their determination and tenacity and their willingness to stay the course even in the face of adversity. It is regrettable that some actors could be working to undermine and disrupt the transition process, and the events of 21st September are a clear indication that we must remain vigilant and we must redouble our efforts in support of the transitional government. Kenya commends the transitional government for the progress made in implementing political, governance, economic, legal, and structural reforms as outlined in the Constitutional Declaration and the Juba Peace Agreement. And we thank His Excellency the Prime Minister for outlining many other achievements that have been made by the transitional government. Kenya sees an opportunity for 4 priorities for Sudan going forward. The first is that a successful transition can only be achieved through an inclusive political process, in a peaceful atmosphere that fosters dialogue and cooperation and reflects the collective will and aspirations of the friendly people of Sudan. This process ought to be guided by the expeditious implementation of the Constitutional Declaration and the Juba Peace Agreement. We urge the people of Sudan to continue with an all-inclusive transitional process, including transitional mechanisms and institutions of governance that will bring together and hold a credible democratic election process in the coming months. In this process, we ask for the meaningful participation of women in the transitional process and in the upcoming electoral, political, governance, and economic processes that remain ahead. Thirdly, in dealing with the root causes and drivers of conflict, we note that there are still intermittent localized conflicts in Sudan, particularly in Darfur, and we urge the people and authorities of Sudan to put into place preventative measures to sustainably address these localized conflicts. Fourth, the road ahead for Sudan remains challenging, and we recognize that the country needs a lot of support to overcome the huge inherited challenges and obstacles facing the transitional government. Kenya remains ready individually and collectively with IGAD, with UNIMAS, AU, and other friends of Sudan to help Sudan navigate its way through this difficult process to ensure stability and prosperity for the country and the entire Horn of Africa. I thank you.
Thank you, Madam Minister. I now give the floor to His Excellency, Mr. Faisal bin Farhan Al Saud, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Saudi Arabia.
Thank you very much, Excellency Mr. Abdullah Hamdok, Prime Minister of Sudan, Excellency Mr. Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, Excellency Ms. Ine Eriksen Søreide, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Kingdom of Norway. Allow me to begin by extending my appreciation to you for convening this important meeting to discuss ways in which the international community can further support Sudan's peaceful transition and help the transitional government overcome the challenges it faces. In April 2019, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia declared its unwavering solidarity with the people of Sudan and the choices they made for their future. We accorded the highest importance to the Sudan's peace and stability in the face of the many challenges it faced by providing much needed humanitarian aid and development support and supporting any steps that serve the interests of the Sudanese people. The Kingdom continues to be at the forefront of global efforts to facilitate peaceful transition in Sudan, and we adopted two simultaneous approaches operating through multinational frameworks as well as pursuing mediation efforts between our brothers and sisters in Sudan. And we are proud of our work as part of the Friends of Sudan group. As we meet today in the margins of the United Nations 76th General Assembly, I assure you that the UN has a central role in facilitating Sudan's successful transition. Based on this conviction, we fully support the UN Integrated Transition Assistance Mission, UNITAS, in its mandate. We affirm our solidarity with the Republic of Sudan as it seeks to preserve state institutions and secure a stable, prosperous future for its people. And as such, my country strongly condemned the coup attempt on the 21st of September. Excellencies, the economy is the cornerstone of sustaining the transition momentum. And in this regard, we congratulate the government of Sudan on the reforms it has taken so far and encourage it to continue on this important path. We were very happy to see approval for Sudan to take advantage of the IMF's HIPC facility, and we're happy to help facilitate that. We call on our international friends and partners, along with regional and international financial institutions, to join in continuing to respond to Sudan's urgent needs. The issue of debt and recovery continues to be the most pressing and worth highlighting in achieving rapid progress in addressing the transition. I would like to conclude by affirming the Kingdom's firm stance beside our brothers and sisters in Sudan. We will continue to rally global efforts to support Sudan, enabling it to retain its regional and international standing. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Al-Saad. I'd like to now give the floor to Her Excellency Dr. Naledi Pandor, Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, South Africa.
Thank the co-chairpersons, the Secretary General of the United Nations, as well as Minister Surede, for inviting South Africa to be part of this deliberations. I also wish to greet His Excellency Prime Minister Hamdok and to congratulate him, the government and people of Sudan, for the very visible progress that Sudan has made in rebuilding Sudan's standing on the international stage, in reviving public institutions, and in beginning the development of a framework for building a sustainable democracy. We've also noted the incredible strides that the transitional government has led in supporting efforts to end violence in Darfur and Eastern Sudan, as well as the conclusion of the Juba peace agreement, which we believe was the most significant achievement on our continent. We are also aware of Sudan's efforts to grow and stabilize its economy, and as South Africa, we stand ready to be of support and to partner in this regard. We are also ready to share our experience on the process of drafting a new constitution and organizing free, fair, and well-administered elections as scheduled for Sudan in 2024. I'm aware that one of our premier conflict resolution non-governmental organizations is working with different constituencies in Sudan in supporting the process toward transition, and as government, we are ready to lend support. I'm aware that the COVID-19 pandemic must have placed a very huge burden on Sudan and the efforts to transition that are currently underway. We believe that it is crucial that the international community should afford the government of Sudan time to ensure a successful transition to democracy, and that it should provide full support to transitional authorities to ensure meaningful achievement of success and the building of sustainable peace and development throughout Sudan. We urge all in the international community to fully provide consistent support in order to accelerate progress to democracy, to indicate its cogent and concrete needs to us so that within the institutional and other means available to us, we could lend support to Sudan. We also believe that all of us in the international community must make good on pledges that we've made to the Sudanese government regarding loans, debt relief, and foreign direct investment, as well as other forms of tangible financial support that have been promised as part of efforts to revive Sudan's economy. Let me conclude by reiterating South Africa's firm support to the transitional government in Sudan and to indicate that we are firmly opposed to any attempt to derail or disrupt the transition progress which the people of Sudan have striven so hard for. I thank you, Chairperson.
Minister of International Development Cooperation of Sweden. I understand Sweden is having technical difficulties. We'll come back to Sweden later. I'll give the floor now to Her Excellency, Ms. Samantha Power, Administrator, United States Agency for International Development.
Thank you so much, Undersecretary DiCarlo. Great to see you. I want to thank Secretary General Guterres and Minister Soreda for hosting this important and truly timely conversation. I also want to thank Prime Minister Hamdok for his leadership in lighting what he calls the way forward for Sudan's hopeful yet fragile transition to democracy. Hopeful yet fragile. I had the chance to visit Sudan in August, and everywhere I traveled in the country, those words seemed to describe the mood. A country I had only known as a place scarred by war and dictatorship was teeming with hope, but its people, of course, clear-eyed about just how difficult the road ahead is. I visited the Zamzam IDP camp in Darfur and spoke to women who had actually pooled their resources in order to pay to travel to Khartoum in order to join the protests against the Bashir government. They had nothing, and yet being part of those protests meant so much to them. And they described a sense of freedom as if I think the way they put it was that they had felt like they were living in a hole. And now suddenly with Bashir out of power, it felt so different. But their faces turned weary when they spoke about the violence that still plagues parts of Darfur, as the Juba Peace Agreement has yet to be fully implemented. In Al-Fashir, I met with an ambitious new civilian governor who urged the international community to think bigger and see Sudan as a country in need of good governance and strong civil society, not just a country to be a recipient of humanitarian aid. But as I talked to him, he struggled to prioritize how to respond to so many economic and security issues that are facing the people he represented. Food, water, electricity, schools, agriculture, jobs, homes for those displaced persons who had lost them. Where to start, where to concentrate, hugely challenging. In Khartoum, when I had the privilege of seeing Prime Minister Hamdok and his team, I also met several young men and women activists who spoke proudly about the risks that they took to usher in Sudan's revolution, including I got to meet Ala Saleh, who gained worldwide attention when a picture of her was taken during the revolution, and she became known as Lady Liberty of Sudan, or the Woman in White. She and the other activists spoke with such pride about their role in ushering in this transition, but also with great concern about the need for accountability. and concerned that at any moment the prospect of a truly democratic Sudan might be snatched away. And of course, there are reasons to worry. In the shadow of a failed coup, it is undeniable that not every person in Sudan is committed to this free, civilian-led, peaceful country. But it is what the vast majority of Sudanese have longed for such a long time. It is what all of us gathered today want to do everything in our power to support. For our part, the U.S. has committed an additional $700 million in development assistance. We are working very closely with the government and our civil society partners to expand U.S. aid programming, to help the country strengthen its health system, develop its agricultural potential, tackle corruption, weather the difficult downsides of putting in place the economic reforms, the near-term shocks to the system through social safety net programs with the World Bank and others, and working with the government to support it as it attempts to bring security forces under civilian control. All of us across the international system have to do everything we can to honor the sacrifices of the Sudanese people and help shepherd Sudan through this incredibly hopeful but also fragile transition to democracy. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Administrator Power. I'd like now to give the floor to His Excellency, Mr. Bankole Adeoye, Commissioner for Political Affairs, Peace and Security of the African Union. Commissioner Bankole, you have the floor.
Well, thank you very much, Excellencies, Secretary General of the United Nations, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Norway, Prime Minister Hamdok, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Chairperson of the African Union Commission, we wish to make this very brief statement. Today, the African Union Commission joins the rest of the international community to reiterate the commitment to supporting and accompanying the transitional government of Sudan in its very uneasy path towards sustainable peace, security, and stability. As the African Union, we acknowledge and welcome the progress that has been made by the government in the transitional process in the face of almost insurmountable odds. In general, significant progress has been made in the promotion of peace in Sudan between the government, particularly, and the armed movements, most notably through the Juba Agreement of 2020. While the agreement provides a solid basis for reconciliation between Khartoum and the marginalized regions of Darfur, Blue Nile, and South Kordofan in particular, however, in recent months, there have been a worrying increase in communal fighting, especially in Darfur. It is important that as we go ahead, we know, Excellencies, that much more needs to be done, particularly in the face of the political and peace processes in Sudan. The main Achilles heel remains the state of the economy. The basic fact is that the economic crisis has intensified since the 2019 revolution, and the failure to deliver any democratic dividends imperils the revolution and threatens the political transition. It is for this reason that the African Union joins the international community in assuring support for the government of Sudan to stabilize its economy and place it on the path of full economic recovery. The sine qua non for the success of the Sudanese transition is therefore very, very critical. Excellencies, as has been said, the African Union is also concerned at the state of the continuing insecurity in the Sudanese transition process, as evidenced by the attempted coup last week. We also, as the African Union, join you in condemning this coup and other forms of instability. It is important that we continue to support Sudan at this time. Excellencies, let me end by emphasizing our commitment to accompany Sudan in the evolving needs of the transition. As we assure Sudan, and the Prime Minister in particular, the African Union will stand together with Sudan for the success of what he has termed the multidimensional transition, knowing fully well that the comprehensive reforms will also receive a firm support. I thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Bakole. We're going now to Sweden again, to His Excellency, Mr. Per Olsen Frid, Minister for International Development Cooperation.
Thank you very much, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, friends. Thank you for hosting and convening this important and timely event. I had personally the privilege to visit Sudan when Prime Minister Hamdok was just 2 weeks in office. It was just after the revolution and the transition government was formed. And it was clear already then that the road ahead would be far from easy for Sudan. But in my meetings in Khartoum at that time, just weeks after the revolution, as I said, it was also clear that the public support and demand for a new Sudan was broad and very deep-rooted. The stories I was given by the young women and men that I met, I have carried them with me since. The events of last week highlights how frail and fragile the democratic transition is in Sudan as elsewhere. But let me reiterate the Swedish strong support for the democratic transition in Sudan and the civilian-led government under Prime Minister Hamdok's leadership. We're supporting the transition politically, both bilaterally as members of the EU and the core group of members of Friends of Sudan, and financially, both through development cooperation funding and by seconding staff to the transition government offices. Sweden will continue to support the people of Sudan and the transition, because the people of Sudan deserve the new tomorrow they dreamt of and fought for. People of Sudan themselves gave their country this chance, and we, as the international community, now need to continue to do all we can to make it happen and become real. The transition government, with the strong support of the international community, donors, the UN, IFIs, aid providers, civil society, others, must deliver tangible results for the people in Sudan. Necessary reforms have put a strain on the population. We must do all our part to lighten the load and help the population see the positive effects of economic and institutional reforms and the dividends of peace. The civilian-led government have made substantial progress since 2019 and the revolution. Women's rights have advanced, the Juba peace agreement has been signed, the peace process moved forward, and the debt relief process has begun. Great achievements. So many more important steps have to be taken on this journey, and Sweden will continue to support and walk together with Sudan on the journey ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Minister. The next speaker is His Excellency Lord Ahmed of Wilmington, Minister for South Asia, United Nations.
Minister for South Asia and United Nations
of the United Kingdom.
Thank you,
Lord Ahmed,
Under Secretary General.
of the United Kingdom.
Thank you,
Lord Ahmed, you have the floor.
Thank you, Under Secretary General, and it's good to see you again. My thanks to Secretary General Guterres and, of course, my good friend, Foreign Minister Eriksson Soredor. It's always good to be having you in the chair. May I firstly also acknowledge the presence of His Excellency Prime Minister Hamdok. It's good to see you, Prime Minister. I recall with great fondness our meeting during the Media Freedom Coalition launch back in 2019 at the UN. And may I praise your dedication, your leadership during this difficult but important transition to democracy in Sudan. I further congratulate your government on the progress that has been made, particularly on economic reforms and progress under the Heavily Indebted Poor Countries initiative. This Sunday marks the first anniversary of the Juba Peace Agreement, as we've heard, a landmark step towards security and justice for the people of Sudan. Progress on the agreement, however, has been slower than we all would have hoped. We therefore urge the signatories to establish the Peace Commission and security arrangements. We also call for the swift establishment of the monitoring and evaluation mechanism. This will provide the transparent assessment that international partners need to support the implementation of the peace agreement. The formation of the Transitional Legislative Council is another vital step to be taken towards a more inclusive and more democratic Sudan. Secretary General, Foreign Minister Sreda, there have been significant progress since 2019, but Sudan's journey is far from over. And I can assure you of this, and indeed the people of Sudan, Your Excellency Prime Minister, that the UK will remain steadfast in our support for the civilian-led transition. We condemn any attempt to destabilize or undermine this important process for Sudan's peace and future prosperity. Sudan's government and the international community must play their parts in ensuring its success. And we, like others, look forward to continuing to support you, Prime Minister, and your government to deliver lasting change for the people of Sudan. Thank you, Under Secretary General.
Thank you, Lord Ahmad. The next speaker is His Excellency Mr. Majdi Ahmad Ibrahim Al-Dafiri, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Kuwait.
Thank you and good evening. Your Excellency Mr. Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, Your Excellency Mr. Abdullah Hamdouk, Prime Minister of Republic of Sudan, Your Excellency Mrs. Ayn Marie Souride, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Kingdom of Norway, Excellency, Honorable Ministers, Ambassador, distinguished participant, it gives me a great pleasure to participate today in this high-level side event. I would like to take this opportunity, if you will, to first recognize and thus thank both the United Nations and our friends in Norway for all that has been done over the past period and will continue to do in helping support Sudan and the great people of Sudan transition, develop and prosper. At this very moment, and as Sudan endeavors to different reforms and rearrangement, economic and otherwise, the international community must continue to stand with Sudan for the Sudanese people, and over the many years have gone through numerous challenges and hardship. It is time for Sudan to move forward, to develop and to prosper. In this regard, and as I conclude, I would like to express and affirm once again Kuwait's full acknowledgement of the initiative and measures taken under the name of the Way Forward to further strengthen the security and broad betterment of the Sudanese people. We also must stay value and role that the United Nations Integrated Transition Assistance Mission in Sudan has played in facilitating and promoting the transition process. Kuwait has in the past and to be precious since March 1962 through a development loan by the Kuwaiti Fund, supported Sudan and indeed will always continue to do so. A safe, stable, more prosperous Sudan is not only important for the region and the Arab world, a safe, stable, more prosperous Sudan is also important to the international community as a whole. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Minister. I'd like now to give the floor to His Excellency, Mr. Sultan bin Saad Al Miraki, Minister of State for Foreign Affairs of Qatar.
Your Excellency, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for inviting us to this important meeting to give us opportunity to hear an update on the ongoing progress and also the hurdles facing this progress in Sudan, which is of a great interest to the state of Qatar. Excellency, as you know, that the state of Qatar, in partnership with the African Union and the United Nations, exerted a great effort to help bring peace and stability to the Sudan by hosting the Doha peace talks, which resulted in Doha document for peace in Darfur. In this conjunction, with that, Qatar undertook projects for reconstruction and sustainable development as well as humanitarian aid. The state of Qatar has fully supported the aspirations of the brotherly Sudanese people for transition, peace, justice, and building the state institution and law. We congratulate the transitional government and the Sudanese people for their notable achievement over the past 2 years and welcome the renowned commitment to enunciated by His Excellency the Prime Minister, Mr. Hamdouk, for completing the historical transition and reform in the interest of the Sudanese people. This commitment needs to be matched by similar commitment by international partners, my country being one of them, to lend support in the political, economic, and security field, clear of regional interventions and special interest. Commitment is also needed to promote Sudanese unity and national accord. This is especially important as Sudan remains at a critical stage and faces economic and fiscal difficulties. For its part, the state of Qatar will not spare any effort to support the people and the transitional government of Sudan. We also reiterate the unwavering stand in supporting of the unity, stability, and sovereignty of Sudan and the support of the choices of Sudanese people. I thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Minister. The next speaker is Her Excellency Ms. Jutta Urpilainen, Commissioner for International Partnerships of the European Union. Madam Commissioner, you have the floor.
Your Excellencies, let me start with clear message. EU strongly condemns last week's attempt coup in Sudan. We remain fully committed to our political and economic support. In that context, I congratulate Sudan on reaching the HIPC decision point. Regaining access to international financing will help to improve the Sudanese people's living conditions. I am proud that the EU played a role in the IMF arrears clearance process. Since the start of the transition, we have provided more than 350 million euros in development assistance to Sudan. In our future cooperation, we will put the focus on political and economic governance, agriculture and green transition, health and education. As the biggest donor of the Sudan Family Support Programme, the EU aims for more rapid rollout of this flagship programme. I also warmly welcome your political initiative to regain the momentum. Now more than ever, we need the different transitional actors to come together and show unity. It is extremely important that the long overdue Transitional Legislative Council is set up shortly to allow for increased transparency. Despite all progress made in Sudan, the high degree of intercommunal violence in regions such as Darfur and East Sudan is worrying. We need to speed up the implementation of the Juba peace agreement. Let me end by stressing the importance that Sudan's own transition and the efforts made over the last years are not overshadowed by the increasingly challenging regional context. We stand by you in this endeavor. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your comments. The next speaker is His Excellency, Mr. Jean-Michel Dumont, Special Envoy for Sudan of France.
Your Excellency, the Secretary General of the United Nations, Your Excellency, the Prime Minister of Sudan, Dr. Abdallah Hamdok, distinguished ministers, ladies and gentlemen, despite all the difficulties and the legacy which has been left by the Bashir regime, the democratic transition process in Sudan has made considerable progress. Respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms has been strengthened during these last 2 years. The effects of the painful economic reforms begin to bear their first fruits. The exchange rate is stabilizing. Inflation is coming down. Growth is coming back. Peace agreements were signed a year ago. They must now be implemented as soon as possible. These results have been made possible only through a good coordination within the transitional authorities between civilians and the military. It is essential that this coordination continues, as discord would only lead to failure. The events which occurred on the 21st of September show that the democratic transition process remains fragile. More remains to be done. Reforming the security apparatus will require working together and in good faith. The deadlines set out in the Constitutional Declaration signed on the 17th of August 2019 must be respected, including the transfer of the chairmanship of the Sovereign Council to a civilian. We also welcome Prime Minister Hamdok's initiative to ensure greater coherence among the political forces that carry the ideals of the Sudanese revolution. The continuation of peace efforts is a priority. We call on the movement that signed the peace agreement to implement their provisions in good faith. This call extends to those movements that remain outside of a peace agreement, whom we invite to join peace negotiations with the government as soon as possible. The Declaration of Principle, which was signed between General Burhan and Abdelaziz El-Ilou, for us represent a good basis. The experience of Sudan democratic transition can serve as a model for the African continent and the Arab world. But for it to succeed, it is essential that Sudan's external partners continue and strengthen their mobilization. The Paris Conference last May, at the initiative of President Emmanuel Macron, enabled the launch this summer of a process alleviating the Sudan's external debt within the framework of the EPIC initiative. Sudan's debt relief will be a breath of fresh air for Sudan. It is important that all of Sudan's external creditors, whether or not they are members of a Paris club, participate in a fair and coordinated manner in the efforts which are required. France has taken and will continue to take its full part in this collective effort. We have promised to cancel the debt that Sudan has, roughly $5 billion, and will continue our support for the Family Support Program. Mr. Secretary General, Mr. Prime Minister, The Sudanese people are strongly expressing their aspiration for freedom, peace, prosperity, and justice. Be assured that France, sharing these ideals, will continue to stand by Sudan and will remain committed to contribute to the success of Sudan's democratic transition. Thank you very much.